Letby is convicted and serving 15 whole life sentences, that's stated plainly. But her legal team's application is still in front of the Criminal Cases Review Commission. The thorough inquiry's final report has been delayed repeatedly and still hasn't been published as of this draft. Additionally, a UK parliamentary debate in March 2026 raised questions about how the police investigation was run. With all this in mind, let's begin. Chester is a small city. Roman walls, a cathedral, a river that floods most winters. In the middle of it sits the Countess of Chester Hospital. And inside that hospital, there is a neonatal unit, not bigger than a few classrooms. June 2015 and June 2016, something happened on that unit that a British court has ruled as murder. However, a growing number of scientists and also members of parliament now say that this might not have been murder to begin with. Lucy Letby. She is currently serving 15 whole life prison terms. Now that's a fact. Now what this episode tries to do is lay out how she ended up there, who tried to stop it, who got it wrong along the way, and why, years after the verdict was given, this case will not sit still. Lucy Letby graduated from the University of Chester with a nursing degree in 2011, specializing in newborn care. She started at the Countess of Chester's Neonatal Unit the following year. By most accounts, she was well liked. She volunteered for extra shifts, took salsa classes on her days off, and also kept cats. Colleagues described her as dedicated, a little bit intense, but dedicated. In an ordinary year, that unit recorded 2 or 3 infant deaths. In June 2015, 4 babies collapsed in the space of a few weeks, and out of 4, 3 passed away. Among them were twins, referred to in court only as Baby A and Baby B. Baby A collapsed and died within 90 minutes of Lucy Letby starting her shift. His twin sister collapsed in a strikingly similar manner less than 24 hours later. She survived. The unit's manager and its lead neonatologist, Dr. Stephen Berry, looked into it informally and reported the deaths to the hospital's Serious Incident Committee, which logged them as nothing but medication errors. Berry, however, noticed Letby had been on shift for both incidents. At the time, he chalked it up to the fact that she was working more hours than almost anyone else on the roster. By October the same year, 2 more babies had died on Letby's shift. Berry raised it again, this time with more concern. He didn't get much traction. Prosecutors would later allege that Letby harmed infants in several different ways over the following months. This included injecting air into their bloodstreams or feeding tubes, deliberately overfeeding a baby with milk through a nasogastric tube, and in 2 cases, poisoning newborns with insulin they did not require. One of those insulin readings showed a chemical signature, a near-absent level of substance called C-peptide that the body does not produce on its own when insulin is injected rather than made naturally. Now that single blood test would later become one of the most fought-over pieces of evidence in the entire case. By June 2016, the picture the consultants were building had a name attached to almost every mark on it. 2 more deaths in the space of 2 weeks. Then, within 24 hours of each other, 2 triplet brothers sadly passed away. Letby had been on duty each time. On June 30, 2016, she was pulled from clinical duties and moved to an office role. Even at this office role, she still retained access to sensitive patient files. The hospital, despite the numerous reports, did not call the police. It called in the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health to review the unit. Their report, delivered that October, found no single explanation for the rise in deaths. It pointed to understaffing and thin senior cover. It described the consultant's suspicion about Letby as subjective and supported by hard evidence. Letby, on the other hand, filed an internal grievance against the doctors who had raised the alarm against her. She argued she had been unfairly sidelined. In January 2017, the trust upheld it. The hospital's chief executive, Tony Chambers, had already apologized to Letby and her parents that December, and he further ordered the consultants who had flagged her to put a formal apology to her in form of writing. 2 of them were sent into mediation sessions with a nurse they suspected of killing children. The consultants did not let this go. In March and April of 2017, 4 of them, including Dr. Brary and Jairam, pushed the hospital's executive again, and on April 27th, they met directly with Cheshire Police. The following month, the trust publicly confirmed police were involved and the investigation got a name, Operation Hummingbird. Police arrested Letby at her Chester home on July 3, 2018. What they found inside her house did more damage to her than almost anything else the prosecution would later argue in court. Officers recovered more than 250 confidential nursing handover sheets kept in her house and arranged in chronological order. Lucy Letby had no legitimate reason for taking said documents home. They found a pattern of late-night Facebook searches for the families of the babies who had passed on. And in a 2016 diary pulled from a chest of drawers, they found a green post-it note written across it in capital letters, "I am evil, I did this." Other notes recovered in the same search read very differently. Some said things like, "I haven't done anything wrong." Another read, "I don't deserve to live. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to take care of them. I am a horrible, evil person." The prosecution would later treat the "I am evil" note as almost a written confession. The defense argued it was something entirely different. The private, spiraling thoughts of a woman who had just had her career and her reputation torn apart. She wrote them down because a counselor had told her to get her feelings on paper as a way of coping. That detail that the notes may have started as a therapy exercise did not come out during the trial. The Guardian reported it more than a year after Letby was convicted, sourced to people close to the case. It wasn't raised in her later appeal either. Letby was arrested a second time in June 2019. She was formally charged in November 2020, ultimately with 7 counts of murder and 15 counts of attempted murder, relating to 17 babies. The trial opened at Manchester Crown Court in October of 2022. It ran roughly for 10 months, one of the longest murder trials in British legal history. Nicholas Johnson KC led for the prosecution. Benjamin Myers KC defended Letby. Johnson's case rested on layers of circumstantial evidence stacked on top of each other. The staffing chart showing Letby present for every incident. The abnormal insulin results. Skin discoloration that expert witnesses linked to air embolism. And the handover sheets and notes found at her home. The collapses of all 17 children concerned were not naturally occurring tragedies, Johnson told the jury. He called Letby the constant, malevolent presence on the ward whenever things went wrong. Myers countered with a different story altogether. Not really a defense of one woman, but an indictment of an entire hospital. The only defense witness besides Letby herself was a plumber by the name Lorenzo Mansuti, who told the court he'd been called out roughly once a week to unblock drains in the aging 1960s-era building. He described a flood in January of 2016. Apparently, foul water started backing up into the sinks in one of the nurseries. It was so bad that staff had started stuffing nappy pads into the ceiling voids above the unit to catch waste leaking down from the floor above. Letby herself took the stand for several weeks that spring. She grew tearful, describing how the accusations had affected her mental health. She told the jury that she had meant no harm and said unit had simply been chronically understaffed. Under cross-examination, reporters in the courtroom noted her account sometimes grew tangled, a stark contrast from how her colleagues had described her years earlier. One mother whose twin boys had been conceived through IVF told the court that she had wanted children more than anyone else could imagine. Letby was convicted of killing one of the twins and had been accused of poisoning the other with insulin, leaving him with lasting learning difficulties. August 18, 2023, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on 7 counts of murder and 7 of attempted murder. They acquitted her on 2 further counts and couldn't reach a verdict on 6 others. 3 days later, Justice James Goss sentenced her to a whole life order, the harshest sentence available under English law with no possibility of parole. It made her only the fourth woman in UK history to receive such a sentence. One of the 6 unresolved counts did not disappear. It concerned a baby referred to as Baby K. She was born 2 weeks early on February 17, 2016. Her breathing tube was found dislodged 3 separate times, with Letby left alone with her. Prosecutors retried that single charge in June of 2024. On July 2nd of the same year, the jury convicted her. 3 days later, she received a 15th whole life order. Letby's team tried twice to get the Court of Appeal to overturn her convictions. Once in 2024, covering the original 14 cases, and then once later that year, covering the 15th. Both attempts were rejected. In its written judgment on the first, the Court of Appeal called the original trial thoughtful, fair, comprehensive, and correct. By any normal measure, that should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. Letby's current legal team, led by barrister Mark MacDonald, took the case to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, the body that investigates possible miscarriages of justice in England and Wales. Central to the submission is a panel of 14 international medical experts convened by Shu Lee, a retired neonatologist from the University of Toronto. In February of 2025, the panel announced its conclusion. It found no medical evidence that any of the babies had been deliberately harmed, and attributed the deaths and collapses instead to natural causes or to substandard care, citing understaffing, delayed treatment, and missed complications. One panel member, Nina Modi, a professional of neonatal medicine at the Imperial College of London, wrote afterwards that the jury had been told that the babies were mostly healthy, when in fact many were, in her words, overtly unwell or at a high risk of developing complications. She said that the information hadn't been properly weighed at trial. Lawyers for the victim families, on the other hand, rejected the panel's findings outright, calling them full of analytical holes and, in essence, a rehash of arguments the original jury had already heard and dismissed. In August of 2024, prosecutors confirmed that dorswipe K data used at trial to help place Letby at the scene of certain collapses had been mislabeled. Entries and exits had been recorded in reverse for one of the unit doors. That same month, a leaked internal report revealed the Neonatal Unit had experienced an outbreak of a dangerous bacterium during the exact period several of the deaths had occurred, something never mentioned during trial. A medical microbiologist, David Livermore, said the outbreak offered a simpler explanation for the spike in deaths than deliberate harm. By March of 2026, the questions had reached Parliament. In a Commons debate, a member of Parliament argued that Operation Hummingbird had built much of its medical case around a single retained expert witness, pediatrician Dewi Evans, and pressed for scrutiny of how he came to be involved in the investigation in the first place and what he was paid for the work he was doing. As of this writing, the CCRC still hasn't decided whether to send the case back to the Court of Appeal. Until it does, Lucy Letby remains a convicted killer under English law. She is also someone whose case has a widening circle of scientists, lawyers, and now politicians who say it deserves a second look. Whatever the CCRC eventually decides about Lucy Letby herself, a separate government-ordered inquiry has spent 2 years asking a different question. How did a hospital let this go on for a year without calling the police? The thorough inquiry, chaired by Lady Justice Catherine Thirlwall, opened formally in November of 2023 and began hearing public evidence in September of 2024. Witnesses have come forward and described Letby as excited and sometimes even gossipy when discussing a death of a baby. The inquiry has also taken evidence about the hospital executives who had dismissed early warnings, forcing consultants into an apology, and left Letby in a role with access to patient files even after removing her from the ward. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt appeared before the inquiry in 2025 and apologized to the families for how long it took the wider health system to act appropriately. The fallout nonetheless has kept spreading. Cheshire Police reviewed roughly 30 additional suspicious cases and close to 4,000 admissions across 2 hospitals. In July of 2025, they submitted evidence on 9 more babies for a charging decision. In January of 2026, the Crown Prosecution Service said no further charges would follow. Separately, 3 former hospital executives were arrested in 2025 on suspicion of corporate manslaughter. In February of 2026, coroners opened inquests into the deaths of 5 of the babies, a process complicated by the fact that criminal convictions already exist in both cases, which now narrows down what a coroner is legally allowed to conclude. The Thawal Inquiry's final report was originally promised for November of 2025. It has been delayed twice since then. As of this recording, it is still not published. For a moment, I want us to strip away the statistics panels, the parliamentary debates, and the competing expert reports. And what is left are 17 families who brought newborns into a hospital neonatal unit. And in one way or another, whoever is to blame did not get to bring them back home the way they expected. Lucy Lepi is currently in prison for the rest of her life, convicted by 2 juries who had the evidence firsthand and were sure enough to convict beyond reasonable doubt. Whether that verdict survives the next few years of scrutiny is genuinely not something anyone can say with confidence as of right now. Not the families, not the scientists on either side, and definitely not me. What is not in dispute is that something failed on that unit long before anyone called the police. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.